decided to do our documentary on the effects of developmental disorders on motor development in children. The social model of disability states that disability results when features of the physical, social, or attitudinal environment restrict participation in activities that an individual needs or wants to do. We wanted to further research the impact of specific developmental disorders on motor development and discover varying ways to improve the child's ability to get involved and be more physically active.
Can you tell Caitlin and her friends what your name is?
What's your name? Look at the camera. Go look at her. What's your name?
Austin. How old are you, Austin?
How old?
11. Good job. What grade are you in school? 6th grade. And what school do you go to? South Middle School. So Austin was born on April 17th of 2007. And we knew before he was born at our 20-week ultrasound, the ultrasound tech had said that something didn't seem quite right, referred us on. Long story short, we did lots of testing, worked with high risk OB doctors. That was a long time ago, I can't remember the words. And did lots of testing, and originally they came back and it said that after doing some ultrasounds, they said that they thought he had what's called the Andy Walker malformation, which is a malformation of the brain, but they weren't sure, and we ended up doing a fetal MRI when I was 7.5 months pregnant, about, I suppose it was, and when that came back, they had sent the images over to the pediatric neurosurgeon with Children's Hospital in Minneapolis, and we met with Dr. Naguib, an amazing man, and he looked at it and said, without a doubt, he says it's schizencephaly. Kind of explained to us what it was, that it's a brain malformation, and kind of made a plan at that point.
Schizencephaly is an extremely rare developmental birth defect characterized by abnormal slits or clefts in the cerebral hemispheres of the brain. Babies born with this birth defect commonly have developmental delays in speech and language skills, and problems with brain and spinal cord communication. Most will experience seizures, which Austin did. The causes of schizencephaly are difficult to determine. Some research points to a mutation of an SHH gene, pointing towards a probable hereditary and genetic cause. Between 2014 and 2016, the prevalence of developmental disabilities among kids ages 3 to 17 increased from 5.76% to 6.99%. The rise stems from an uptick in children diagnosed with a developmental delay other than autism or intellectual disability. Across all conditions, the CDC found that prevalence was significantly higher among boys than girls. The diagnoses were least common among Hispanic children compared to other racial or ethnic groups. Research shows that children with disabilities have delays or disorders in gross and fine motor skill development. There is also evidence that there are differences in motor control and motor planning. The children may also suffer in areas such as visual motor integration, commonly referred to as hand-eye coordination, locomotion skills, and object manipulation. Oftentimes, children with autism spectrum disorder who display signs of poor motor skills may suffer from an underlying disability that is responsible for the lack of motor skills. Developmental disabilities may affect the child's view of themselves. For example, children with developmental coordination disorder, DCD, experience poor fundamental movement skills along with proficiency and self-concept. Results also show that children with DCD felt less competent in coordination, sporting ability, and health. Such motor impairments and low self-esteem significantly interfere with an individual's ability to engage in activities of daily living and/or gain academic achievement. Social and emotional problems usually become prevalent as early as preschool. During childhood years, many children suffering from a developmental disability express aggressive behavior, most likely as a result from the prevalence of negative affect during play interactions. The perception action theory states that movement provides perceptual information that influences movement and interaction with the environment. This cycle promotes cognitive development and enhances the motivation to move. Variability of movement is an essential part of development. Complexity is the temporal structure variability and has been shown that an optimal level of complexity characterizes healthy human function. This is a state midway between excessive order and excessive disorder. During development, complexity plays a role by requiring cooperation among participating systems and integrating perceptual information to allow the child to adapt to changing task demands. The perception action approach employs the environmental setup and unique manual therapeutic guidance. Recent research supports the use of this approach, and it highlights its benefits for children with movement disorders.
Many disorders that affect individuals' cognitive and/or physical capabilities have similar deficits on motor development. However, some disorders have their own characteristics. We examine the impacts that Down syndrome, autism spectrum disorder, cerebral palsy, joint hypermobility syndrome, and developmental coordination disorder have on movement patterns. Research shows that poor motor skills are known to be more common in children with intellectual disabilities. Individuals with Down syndrome often experience problems in motor development. These include assuming and maintaining anti-gravity posture, reduced postural tonus, increased joint mobility, insufficient co-contraction, and lack of postural reaction negatively influence overall postural control. Compensations seen in people with Down syndrome are reduced variability and functionality of motor behavior. Static and symmetrical postural movement patterns help to maintain balance. Compensations are seen in every phase of development. Autism spectrum disorder affects cognitive or social abilities in individuals. The disorder can have effects on acquisition of motor skills, for example, running, jumping, throwing, and catching, specifically due to deficits in motor planning, movement imitation, and postural stability. These decreased skills affect their ability to participate in games and sports. Difficulties can cause children to withdraw from activities out of fear of embarrassment or ridicule. Research showed that those who have Asperger's performed significantly worse in balance, bilateral coordination, and strength tests. Post-mortem examinations revealed that the reason for these motor deficits is the increased white matter in the premotor cortex of the brain. That, combined with the social cognitive impacts that may be experienced, make participation in physical activity even more of a challenge. Majority of people with cerebral palsy have troubles with walking and physical activity. They are reported to walk less than unaffected individuals and be less physically active. Cerebral palsy has 5 different gross motor function classification levels. Children and youth with level 1 have less restrictions and often walk without any devices. Their ability to run and jump may enable more social participation in physical activities. Levels 2 and 3 indicate reduced speed and endurance, where levels 4 and 5 require partial or total assistive devices. Having decreased walking efficiency may limit their ability to keep up with peers, especially in outdoor activities and in the community. Walking uses a lot of energy in people with cerebral palsy. This high energy cost causes children to be more fatigued and less likely to exercise. Motor function has been shown to be predictive of restrictive participation in mobility, education, and social relations of children with cerebral palsy. Exercise and sports programming help to offset the negative effect associated with reduced levels of fitness. Positive success has been seen in sports such as swimming, cycling, wrestling, and rock climbing, thus improving the levels of self-perception in individuals. Joint hypermobility syndrome is an inherited connective tissue disorder where collagen is hyperelastic. Limitations are prominent in clumsiness, chronic fatigue, muscle cramps, sprains and strains, as well as memory and concentration issues. Significant pain reduces activity limitations and participation restrictions. Motor impairments associated with developmental coordination disorder significantly interferes with an individual's ability to engage in activities of daily living and/or gaining academic achievement. They experience poor fundamental movement skills, along with proficiency and self-concept. Due to negative experiences, children tend to avoid and withdraw from physical activity, therefore limiting their opportunity to improve skill levels. It was reported that they felt less competent in coordinated sporting ability, health, and education. Research showed that physical, social, and psychological functioning of children with developmental coordination disorder are all negatively affected. These problems usually become prevalent as soon as preschool. The limitations in motor activities can lead to poor self-worth. A variety of disorders affect motor development in different ways and interfere with daily life. The effects not only on movement, but also mental, emotional, and physical well-being of disabled individuals.
There is significant evidence that children with disorders that impair motor function during activities of daily living benefit most from early identification and intervention, more specifically, learning meaningful activities in natural environments.
They came out, we did our first eval for physical therapy, probably about 6 months old. He started PT at our home daycare. We always went to home daycare. So they would do PT once a week, and then we started with OT, and we started with speech by a year. So by the time he was a year old, he was receiving all 3 of those services, plus the, what was Mindy's title? She was kind of the overseer of all of it. So basically he had 4 different people that came out and worked with him every week. We were super fortunate. We had 2 really awesome daycare providers at that time in Minnesota that were so open to random people coming to their house to work with him, and were willing to continue to work with him. And yeah, it was kind of a whirlwind. And I know, looking back, we've all have said that early intervention was one of the first people, and you go and you always hear, well, you should do these stretches at home, and you should work on this at home, and you should work on that at home, and if you do everything they tell you to do at home, you have no time left to just be a kid anymore. And she was one of the first ones that said, when we kind of talked about it, and she's like, go to the playground. And I kind of remember looking at her like, what do you mean? She says, go to the playground. Take Nick, go to the playground. He's going to be motivated to want to learn to crawl up the steps, to go down the slide. He's going to be motivated to learn to balance and to hang on to things, so he can have the thrill of going down the slide. And so we did. And it was, I think at that point, for me anyways, that I realized that you have to be in the mindset of what the kids are.
Therapy services for young children with ASD are being implemented and serve several purposes. This allows identification of delays or disorders in development at a younger age. Then intervention activities are put in place and their progress is monitored.
Successful.
Oh, it depends on the disability, right? So,
for instance, cerebral palsy, we could say.
For a physical disability like cerebral palsy, types of physical, PT programs, or any types of early intervention programs that's been provided by a professional and that's evidence-based, it should be beneficial in a way.
Parent involvement in interventions has a positive effect on the early child development of children with disabilities. The parent should learn to stimulate their child in everyday life in a functional and playful manner.
How would you say supportive and involved parents, how crucial are their roles?
It's very important, because if you think about it, the parents spend most of the time with the child, right, or the students. So getting their support and have them on board with the program or the intervention programs is very crucial, and it is a key to success. Because if you think about the prevention program or any types of intervention, it's usually about an hour or 2 hours, right? But parents learn how to provide some similar prevention at home, where they spend most of the time with their child. The intervention can be a little bit more successful or efficient in a way.
According to Austin's parents, Austin's older brother had a huge impact on the progress of Austin.
I mean, to have an older sibling, and he just tries to keep up with them, and that's probably his number one motivator.
It is absolutely his number one motivator.
Is that
his goal in life is to beat Nick at everything Nick ever does.
If Nick plays basketball, I'm playing basketball, and I'm not, I want you to defend me. I mean, how many times we've played outside and it's like, okay, move out of the way and let Austin shoot. He doesn't want you to move out of the way. He wants you on top of him, just like when you're defending anybody else. And we play soccer, and Nick plays and Austin plays, and Austin tries as hard, if not harder, than Nick, I think, sometimes, to go out there and he doesn't give up. But having that older sibling, I've often thought that if Austin was an only child, where would the motivation come from? I mean, it could come from friends and things like that. But when your friends are there during school or get together, but they're not there every day with you. They're not the one, oh, I saw my older brother, he's starting to shower himself and he doesn't need mom and dad's help. Well, I want to do that. And then pretty soon it's like, Nick, can I shower with you? And it's like, Nick, as long as we can, his balance is okay and stuff, and Nick, we didn't have a problem with it. And just things like that.
Those little things is what got him to the point where he's like, I don't want mom's help.
Yeah.
I don't want dad's help. I can do this on my own.
Getting the child involved in physical therapy and occupational therapy as soon as possible can improve impairments in motor control, muscle performance, and musculoskeletal alignment that contributes to activity limitations in sitting, standing, transfers, and mobility. Austin uses what his family calls a talker. Because Austin's speech is difficult to understand, he is able to use a tablet-like device to communicate with others.
Equipments. What devices do you find to be the most helpful for children with disabilities, like say cerebral palsy or Down syndrome?
Well, there's many different types of assistive technologies available nowadays. Once again, it all depends on what kind of disability the students have. As a professional, you have to pick the best evidence-based, assistive technologies available to use. For me, PC tablets and smartphone has been very practical and useful for me because anything that I need, because I'm in support of visualization. So whenever a student needs some visualization, when they need some visual guidance, I can just go ahead and use my tablet, I can use my smartphone to show them what they need to do. And I can also utilize my iPhone as a visual schedule so that students will have, or a person with disability have a clear expectation in terms of what they will need to do, what they will need to complete, what their next task will be, things like that. So that has been worked out very nice for me. But say for physical disability, prosthetics and things like that could be also very important.
In summary, there has been a rise in prevalence of developmental disabilities in children within the past few years. With this comes difficulties for the child in motor control, motor planning, hand-eye coordination, and many other conditions. Developmental disabilities can affect the child's view of themselves and what others think of them, causing more social and emotional problems. All of the different disorders can cause similar problems with motor development and beyond. We looked more closely at Down syndrome, autism, cerebral palsy, and joint hypermobility. Those with Down syndrome experience postural and movement pattern difficulties. Autism can show cognitive and social challenges in individuals. Cerebral palsy can create more trouble with walking and physical activity for those with it. Joint hypermobility will show signs of clumsiness and muscle problems due to hyperelastic joints. All of these hinder daily life in different ways, but can be well maintained through intervention. There is outstanding evidence that shows when children receive intervention, they greatly benefit. Therapy services, parent involvement, and family can all help them be the best they can be. With the rise of developmental disorders in children in the United States, it is important that the society continues to provide services for these children. More special education teachers in schools, more adaptive physical activity opportunities, and more parent involvement can help improve the lives of many children.
Over AFOs. And now there's groups on some of these groups I'm on. When we find a shoe or something, it's the first thing we post. Hey, anybody out there that has AFOs, you got to check out these shoes, And companies are getting there. Zappos, huge online retail now has Zappos Adaptive. Everything on there is adaptive clothes, shoes, and I'm like, finally, where have you been all my life? And so you're seeing more and more of that, and some of it too is because I'm that much more aware of those things, so you do see them, but they are out there more prevalent because it's not, look at Target. They released the Cat and Jack, line of clothing, sensory-friendly clothing, and in their ads, my mother-in-law was looking this weekend at the little Target Christmas book that just recently came in the mail. She's like, I can't believe all the kids in here with disabilities. And I went, okay, didn't even notice that yet. But, as a whole, I think we're getting to that point of understanding that just because somebody has a disability doesn't make them any less of a person, you know.